Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Variety and Diversity in Science Fiction and Fantasy panel. I'd like to introduce our guests. On the extreme left, physically, Gadi Goran, who, as I said when I introduced her to Kelly, has read all the books.
Almost all the books. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yeah. Right next to her is the Eikon guest of honor, Walter John Williams. Walter has written pretty much every kind of book, and some things that aren't books, such as games, and is one of our guests of honor. Next up is Ronnie Graff from Graff Publishing. And Ronnie's been publishing every kind of book, except those he doesn't like.
That's the only criteria.
Yeah. And finally, our surprise guest today, who was not on your program, our other guest of honor, Kelly Armstrong. Who is a super successful urban fantasy, paranormal romance, however you'd like to define it. Do you have a preference?
Usually urban fantasy, and only because what we say is, if you call something romance and that's not the main point of the book, it disappoints. Urban fantasy.
Yes, and also been writing more YA as of late. So we've got a really nice, diverse panel, which is good because, well, apart from the fact that we're all fairly fair-skinned, but apart from that, we're fairly diverse, which is good because we're going to talk about the fact that science fiction has become a much more diverse field, both in the writing and the people who are doing the writing. My first question to the panel is, are you interested as readers in reading stuff that's diverse and different, or are you more interested in sticking to a certain lane? I'll start with Gali.
Don't you want to start with our guest of honor?
No, because we're going to go through here.
Oh, okay.
But you will. But Walter, I'm deputizing you to take Gali's microphone away.
I don't need a microphone, so probably you can kick me under the table. First of all, of course, I'm interested in reading more diverse things, both from the point of view of the people who actually produce the writing. And there has been a lot of discussion in genre fiction and generally in recent years about promoting work by people of color and books in which the heroes, first of all, aren't your typical straight white North American guy, either, again, people of color, either from America or from other places in the world, based on more diverse experiences and more diverse backgrounds. And I think it enriches literature in general, not even just genre fiction, because they're bringing experiences that we are unfamiliar with. I mean, again, from my narrow point of view as a staunch and rabid feminist, as a feminist, we always say that, you know, the world women live in isn't the world men live in. Therefore, when a woman's voice brings something that a man's voice can't, simply because she's bringing different experiences to the table and to the narrative and to the literature. And it's the same with anyone who comes from a background that's different than ours. So yes, we are very much, I think, interested in hearing those voices. Of course, we also see the backlash against it. I think there was a Gamergate. You write games, so you were involved in Gamergate in recent months.
No, I heard of Gamergate for the first time today.
Oh.
Well, you're not on Twitter.
No.
And you're not on Tumblr.
That's why.
Join Twitter, join Tumblr. That's where no, seriously, that's where discussions are happening about diversity at the moment. And you see the backlash from the straight white guys who are very much offended that only 99% of books are about them, and 1% is about other people. And I'm all for that. Yay. Okay, that's it.
Walter.
Okay. My first sales were not science fiction, they were historical fiction. And I wrote sea adventure stories as a beginning author. And it was all about 200 guys on a boat, 200 men on a boat. Okay, and I wrote 5 of these. And trying to get diversity onto those ships of any kind was kind of a struggle. And so when I became a science fiction writer, I felt like a child in a candy store. I was, oh, I'll have some of this, and I'll have some of this. So my first science fiction novel had a female protagonist on an alien world, and she was a person of color, and as different from those guys on the boat as I possibly could. And so I not only like diversity, I practice diversity in what I write, which actually very few people have noticed. So I must have some kind of uncanny skill for writing unusual characters and situations and making them seem strangely normal.
I just want to comment about that again, the platform on which these discussions are happening are Twitter and Tumblr, in which you will be surprised, but people very much take notice when someone, especially a white American guy, chooses to go and write from a different point of view to bring people of color as characters and protagonists. It's very much noticed, very much lauded. So these voices are being heard, and it is very much being noticed, just maybe not in the mainstream of discussion. So people are noticing it.
Okay.
Okay. So I started reading science fiction and fantasy at a very young age. I think I was 10 or 11, and of course I started with the classics, Arthur C. Clarke, Asimov, everybody else, and of course most of the books were about white males in America or in an American-like environment. But then
American space.
In American space. And then, just by chance, a few years later, I stumbled upon, in the same month, I think, in a very short period, I stumbled upon 2 authors that were totally different. One was the only book that was translated to Hebrew at the time by Octavia Butler. And I read the, I remember I read the back cover, and they said something about genetical engineering, and I said, yeah, okay, let's read that. I think I was like 14 or 15 years old at the time. And then I read the book, and I was like, wow, this is so different, and this is so interesting. And of course, I knew that whoever wrote the back cover of that book in Hebrew didn't have a clue what the book was about. Because from the back cover, I thought it would be about 2 protagonists who are living in a white America doing some, well, genetical engineering.
Or they knew but were afraid to put it on the cover.
Well, maybe. That's what I thought at the time. I don't know the real story until today. And at the same month, I also stumbled upon a short story by, I think it's one of her most famous short stories, When He Changed by Joanna, which is a wonderful, wonderful story. I had issues with it because I'm a guy, and I thought that they might have had, she might have taken it to extreme, but she did it in a very interesting way. And I've never read anything like that before, and all I could think of was, well, I want more like that. And then I started reading in English because what was translated to Hebrew wasn't enough for me, and once I did that, a whole new horizons just opened to me, and I started to read all kinds of stuff, although I felt for many years that being a white male protagonist in a science fiction story is probably about 90-something% of the stories. So I was really glad this year when one of the best science fiction books that I've ever read, Ancillary Justice, not just one, but one like in big way, especially with all the politics that went behind it. I'm not going to go into it. And during Lancome, Didy might say a few words about it if you'd like to later. But I thought that this time in London, we might have crossed a threshold of some kind, and that from now on things, I hope, will be a bit different, which is good because I'm all for diversity, not just fantasy, science fiction, alternative history, and things like that, which are great because I love all kinds of internal genres in science fiction and fantasy. But I would like to see more kinds of people writing more kinds of stuff. One of my best friends when I go to cons is Tobias S. Backel. I don't know if you know him. And he hasn't been translated to Hebrew yet, partly my fault. But he comes from the Caribbean, and his science fiction is very, very different and very, very interesting. So I really find it interesting to talk to him whenever I meet him. And yes, I'm all for diversity. That's all I have to do. Yes, I want more of that.
We'll take a break, stand against them.
So that's my job, Dark.
Yeah, that'd be you.
And you really can't, because to me diversity is obvious. It's a reflection of the world that I live in. I live outside Toronto, and in any Canadian city, it's very multicultural. And we have obviously had gay marriage for quite a while now. So many types of diversity are just what I see in the world around me. So to read something that is all white straight fiction, to write something that is all white straight fiction would be very, very odd to me. You were talking about Twitter. There was an interview going around on Twitter last week where somebody was being interviewed, and he was talking about the golden era of Nickelodeon. And he was talking about, yes, when it was mostly white characters, and he was using as an example one show, and I'm not familiar with them. My kids are older now, but he was saying that this one show had a Indo-American protagonist, and there was no reason for the character to be Indian. I thought that is the point, is that you do not say, I'm only going to have diverse characters if they fulfill a specific role within my book. The point is that they are every character, and whether it's reading or writing them, you really want to reflect that. And especially in YA, it is a big movement to make sure that you do have diversity, because that is, for the average teen, the world that they see around them.
Yes.
Of course.
Kylie's been dying to say things for a while now.
I just wanted to say absolutely.
No. The thing is that, of course, it all sounds very nice around this table, and it's a problem that I've sort of encountered before, because the community that I'm part of, both online and offline, is a very sort of diverse and accepting and open-minded community. And then you sort of start thinking that that's...
We're even accepting the fact that you like Teen Wolf.
They're pretty boys and they're half naked. What's not to like?
You had to go there? You simply had to go there?
Anyway, some people like Twilight, okay? There's still a ways to go. Look, the problem is that when you live your life within this sort of community, online and offline, you sort of start to think that this is how the world thinks and this is how the world works, and it isn't and it doesn't. And then when you leave the safe confines of this community and you go out into the world, and suddenly you realize that a lot of people are homophobic and racist and sexist and misogynist, and it's very, very difficult because you're no longer even used to thinking in such simplistic terms. I mean, the discussions that we're having are about, how to bring forth the Caribbean culture versus the Afro-Caribbean culture, while in the mainstream publishing world, when you have a person of color as a protagonist, chances are that the book cover will still have a white face on it, even though the protagonist is a person of color. And we can see it in books, of course, and in the movies that came out lately. Katniss from Hunger Games has olive skin and dark hair. With all due respect to Jennifer Lawrence, who did an amazing job, she looks nothing like Katniss in the books. It's called whitewashing. I'm sure you've come across it. And it's something that we see, again, very much in the publishing world. And I remember discussion from the past few years where, as you know, authors only have a limited influence on how the book cover looks at the end, where authors said, well, we are very much against it. We wrote a person of color. Our whole story takes place in a community of color. And you look at the cover of a book, and it's all blonde, blue-eyed white people. Why? And again, because outside of this very accepting, open-minded, diverse community, the world is still just a tiny bit more backwards, and again, backlash, as I'm sure we'll reach at some point.
I was very quickly speak on that because my fourth YA novel, the main character is Native American, and my previous novels, when they were released in North America, all had a girl's face on the cover. And I knew this was dangerous for the fourth book because I had a really bad feeling they would just give me a dark-haired cover model and say, close enough. So I actually said to them in advance, I said, I must have a cover model who's at least half Native American. And if not, can we just put something else on the cover? Please don't put a girl's face on it. And HarperCollins was actually very good about it. Because I said that, they went out and they had to look hard. Because yes, it's very easy for my first books to find a blonde, white teenage model. To find somebody who was Native American, they had to get a slightly older 20-something model. And they only had two for me to choose from. But I was happy that they actually did make the effort when I mentioned it. I suspect they wouldn't have if I hadn't mentioned it.
Yeah, this is the opposite of my experience with my first science fiction novel, Ambassador of Progress, which I mentioned earlier, has a protagonist who, if she were in America today, would be considered black or African American. In the culture that she's living in, that's not the terminology they use. But of course, by the time she ended up on the cover, she was this ethereal blonde, actually floating in the air. I don't know how, but that was oh dear, nearly 30 years ago. So that was. I don't know that I expected anything else. It never occurred to me to protest. I just thought, yeah, all right. That's the way publishing works. And it was, of course, my first novel, so I didn't really have a lot of clout at that point.
If I may ask you a question. I mean, you said that you wrote a Native American protagonist. So did you need a lot of research? I mean, how was it for a Caucasian woman to write and make, you know, a character that is...
And the North American woman, you know, there's a lot of history there.
Yes.
How was that?
It was a lot of research. Also, she is part of a very small community. She is not living on a reservation, is not living that part of her life. So that really helped. But still, lots and lots of research, interviews. I mean, I know people who are Native, so lots of that. But one of the funny things is that there is the issue of cultural appropriation, which is writing from the point of view of the other. And my publisher was a little bit nervous. So they said, are you at all Native American? I said, I'm 1/8 Iroquois. Good. I'm like, it's 1/8. Doesn't matter. My character is Navajo. Doesn't matter. If anybody complains, you're partly Native American. No.
I want to talk to something that Gali spoke to earlier, which is and relates also to the cover issue, which is Twitter and Tumblr, and the fact that authors who are prominent on social media, because they're such a big part of the promotion of their books, seem to have more of an ability to influence stuff like covers. And have you guys noticed that?
Yeah.
You blog as well.
Yeah, I think there is sometimes a little more of that because, yeah, it depends on whether you would be likely to, complain if you got a bad cover. And if you're somebody who might be known for being a little bit forthright, yeah, I would not make any bones about it. If they had somehow insisted on putting a blonde girl on that cover, I would have had something to say about it, and they kind of know that. So.
Yeah, well, my experience with cover control has been kind of ambiguous because I finally got to the point where I did have control over the cover. I could veto the cover, whatever. I was never consulted about the cover, but You know, I did have a cover that I didn't like, and I said, you know, I really don't like this cover, and can we do another one? And they said, well, yes, you can, and you have that right, and it's in the contract. However, if we have to design a new cover, it will delay publication by a year, and you'll lose all of your promotion money. So I could have I could have a bad cover that was well publicized and appeared on time, or a cover that I really liked that was on a book that would be immediately shit canned. So yeah,
because of course it takes a year to design a cover.
Apparently, yes. Well, at this publisher, I wasn't surprised.
You really do have to pick your battles with cover. Something like the representation of the model, if that's important, that's where you stick your battles. And that's typically where I stick them, and otherwise, I'm usually just, yes, that's fine.
I think the only person on the table solely on the fandom and reader side, and not at all involved in publishing, I can say is on social media, that what I find that helps when an author is very active on social media is that, first of all, we can hear her or his side, and they can make the discussion happen. I don't know if you remember when Wizard of Earthsea came out, and it was totally whitewashed, and the whole point is that Ursula Le Guin purposefully wrote it with the good guys being dark-skinned and the barbarians being light-skinned, and it was an integral part of her world. And of course, when they did a live-action version and they did an animated version, and both of them were totally whitewashed, and her response to this can still be found online. She wrote like a post or an article in which she very firmly and clearly stated, I find this unacceptable, nobody consulted me, I think the whitewashing is wrong, I think what they did here is horrible, I intentionally wanted the good guys to be dark-skinned, etc., etc. It gives voice to the author and in a very direct way to interact with the readers who might otherwise, be angry or frustrated or not realize what's happening behind the scenes. Again, the reason that I'm aware that this whitewashing happens is because of these discussions that have been raised by angry readers and fans, and by the authors and writers who actually responded to them on social media. So I think, again, the presence of authors on social media enables a discussion about diversity, about whitewashing, about representation to happen that couldn't happen before we had these joint platforms.
I just have to say, from a publisher's point of view, I publish Derek Gregory in Israel, and when I published his first book here, Pandemonium, for me it was very natural because we're also good friends, so I emailed him a few covers, a few versions, and I told him, so what do you think? And in response I got, you're really asking me? And I'm like, well yeah, because here in Israel, when you publish an Israeli book, usually the practice is to consult a lot with the author. And because I have friends in publishing also in other parts of the world, I know it's not a common practice.
Sometimes there are advantages to small, weird countries and their odd local customs. You're not that small.
Well, yeah, this is also a country where you cannot possibly escape somebody who, yeah, that's, for me to talk to somebody about this, I would have to fly 2,000 miles to New York. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But email exists.
It's not the same as, coming to someone and punching.
Yes. I wouldn't punch anybody, but I might get in their face a little.
You're not Harlan Ellison, is what you're saying.
You're also not Israeli. You're okay. Local custom.
Okay.
So yeah, Walter's leaving.
I agree with all of you.
There is no punching of guests of honor, Gary. We don't.
During the panel.
Convention.
But just during the convention. You're here for a few days after, aren't you?
I just want to know, I like my news.
Yeah. You've also written games and in other media, and you've been adapted to other media for TV. Yes, in comics. Do you find the landscape in those other industries different in respect to diversity and variety?
Yes, yeah. In fact, I can give one example. I wrote an episode for a TV show called Andromeda, and I do not advise you to watch it because there were epic casting problems on this, and in fact, I wrote
Captain Hercules.
Yes, Captain Hercules. Captain Hercules was fine in this episode, but the guest stars. There was a character that I wrote as a kick-ass Asian leather-clad kung fu babe who happened to be, a police captain. And they did a nice piece of casting. They cast Françoise Yip, who is a martial arts star, Canadian martial arts star who has made movies with Jackie Chan and so on. But she had to fly to Hong Kong at the last second and make a movie. And so they cast this, I don't know, white lady who couldn't act. That's all. She was so bad that she froze whenever the camera was on. And she couldn't remember her lines. And they sent me a rough cut of the show, and I knew I was in trouble in the first 30 seconds because they would never show the guest star talking. They would only show reaction shots from whoever was listening, or in one case they had Captain Hercules in the foreground, and she was walking back and forth in the background like that, with the lines coming out. And I found out later that she was dubbed by another actress. They just in the areas in which they could not avoid having her be on camera. She was just moving her lips, and somebody else was dubbing her. So that's.
Wouldn't it have been cheaper just to get someone else on the film?
It was a very last second thing, and they said she gave a really good audition. I don't know.
Was she hot? Was she hot?
No. Which was partly the fault of the costumer who put an ugly wig on her. But no, I mean it was so.
You do realize I'm going to go online and watch it episode.
We're all going to IMDb to check your credits and.
No, don't do it till after the festival because it will spoil the festival for you. Okay? They sent me the final shooting script, and there had been 32 rewrites on the one script, and some of them, they had 4 rewrites in one day.
Wow.
At one point, where they were trying to rewrite around this. And a few of my lines, a few of my better lines survived. Actually, my best lines survived. So, if you actually see a scene in that program and it works, that's me.
Everything that fails is
everything that fails is actually the fault of the casting problem. But
yeah, comics in general makes it a little bit easier because my experience has been that they draw what I tell them. So there isn't really a problem of that. There is a little bit more of a problem sometimes with the representation of female characters. And I have to be a little bit more specific on that point. But I also have when I write graphic novellas for my own world, I actually have my own artist who is a young woman, so there's no problems there. TV. Okay, so yeah, my first book, Bitten, is a TV show.
It got renewed, correct?
It did get renewed, yes. It's on Space Channel in Canada and Sci-Fi in the US. Now the biggest outcry from readers was that it's about werewolves, and the alpha in the book is half Japanese. His mother was Japanese. The actor is clearly white. And so that was the biggest outcry once that casting came out. And when I spoke to them to the people involved, they honestly didn't understand the problem. They really didn't. So it was the one area, and I told them this point blank. I said, I support you on all your other choices. You know, whether or not somebody's got the right hair color, has the southern accent, does not have it. I support all of that. This is the one thing where I can't. So I did do an online thing, just you know, explaining, yes, you know, that this was you know, done. I obviously, because I had no role in any casting or anything, and I did disagree with it. However, to remind readers that it had nothing to do with the actor who was cast. The actor who was cast obviously had no idea what his character's ethnic background was supposed to be, because of course some of them started taking it out on the actor. And that's not his fault. It would be those who were involved in the casting. But honestly, the impression I got was that they really didn't understand why people were upset with this.
Were they white men by any chance?
Shockingly, all of them.
Yeah, and that's what I think is the problem with what Ronnie said earlier about, and I know you were kind of itching to speak then, about London being a crossing of a threshold.
I hope.
Because it appears to me that we still have a long way to go. There's awareness now. But you know, Cameron Hurley's latest book, The Mirror Empire, had been rejected by nearly every publisher in the business, largely because it's got, let's just say, varied family structures. Families with various husbands and wives and various genders. And publishers thought that might turn readers off. I should also note it is the single best-selling book that the publisher has published at that time in its publication. They sold out really fast.
But
the reason
Heinlein also had various male-to-male.
He was Heinlein when he did it.
By the way, and Heinlein had to, I don't know if, I'm sure, how many people here read for example, I Shall Fear No Evil and The Cat Walked Through Walls? Both the protagonist of I Shall Fear No Evil and the protagonist of The Cat Walked Through Walls are people of color, a woman of color and a man of color, and most people don't know this because it's hidden in the text so well, and the cover art almost never reflects this, that you have to be a true Heinlein aficionado who reads the stories very carefully and the background and the history to even know that Colonel Campbell in The Cat Walked Through Walls and what's her name, because I'm senile, in I Shall Fear No Evil are actually people of color. And the reason that I was itching to talk before is actually relevant to what I said afterwards. Inside the community, we are becoming more aware, and you know, even saying that in Israel, we don't really have, we have, you know, ethnicity problems, but we don't have a lot of issues with people. We're starting to have issues with people of color. We're starting, but it's not something that we historically have issues with. But you know, again,
if you're only counting Jews.
Of course I'm only counting Jews. Come on. But again, you know something, look at this room. Yeah. How many Arabs do you see here, for example? So again, we have this feeling that we're very, very much aware and, you know, open-minded and more diverse and more accepting. But it's inside our tiny little community where we sort of, you know, talk to each other and hug each other, and we're all feminists and we're all, you know, we all believe in all kinds of feminism.
Most.
Most.
Not even in our little.
Not even in our little, but we're more. For example, the chances are, you know, 90% chance that, you know, I talk to a man here and he will, you know, he will say I am a feminist. How often does that happen outside these hallowed halls? It just doesn't. So I think the feeling that you got in Longcon had to do with the community, which is making a lot of progress, and a bit less with the outside world, which is I think, in the midst of a pretty serious backlash against everything.
The question is, and I first want to ask Kelly this. Putting in half Native American person on the cover didn't have any impact on sales. Were they different than the previous books?
As far as I know, any difference in sales had nothing to do with the protagonist. I had one first trilogy that did very, very well, and in YA fiction, my experience is that readers really become attached to characters more than an author. So they were completely, they did not want to even try a new series from me. So it did well. It did not do as well as the first trilogy, but I would never say that it had, I've never had anyone say to me or even suggest to me that that had anything to do with it.
And the reason I ask that is because I've yet to see any evidence that this prevailing belief that putting people of color and a wider diversity of people on covers has an impact on sales. I see it as something that it's a pervasive belief in publishing.
It's a pervasive belief in publishing because publishing, like just about everything else, is controlled by white men who are scared and silly when they see anything but other white men around them. I mean, there's one black Disney princess, and she was taken off the shelves in most stores, and now you can only buy her online. I mean, because black princesses, and it's rubbish, by the way. There are protests across the United States of people saying we want the princess back on the shelf because we want to buy it. But again, the white men who
sure, in the initial line of merchandising for Guardians of the Galaxy did not include any Gamora stuff, because why would anyone want any merchandise relating to a hot green woman?
You know something, leave the hot part out of it. You know, I want to, finally I see a woman on screen kicking ass, you know, give me the opportunity to buy the merchandise. They don't even give you the chance. Or again, this thing with, pardon me, I'm part of a large Tumblr movement who's trying to get a freaking Black Widow movie produced. Who's for Black Widow? It's not right for a Marvel movie with a female protagonist. When will the time be right? Very good question. Not now. It's like, you know, we died here we died today, we don't die tomorrow, and it's always been.
I think they need Scarlett Johansson to be a bigger star than she is. That's what they're waiting for.
Absolutely.
Yes, because somebody capable of opening a movie as dumb as Lucy for what was it, $40 million? Is not a huge star.
I haven't seen it, but is it
I heard
reportedly very stupid.
Okay.
There are two people in ashram in India who haven't heard of her, so you know they're waiting until they know who she is before they release the movie.
Smoke signals.
That's a different kind of Indian.
Yeah.
Anyways, yes, and again, it's this perception that has nothing to do with anything. It's like, and again, whenever something like this comes up, I put the XKCD comics, where you see a guy making a mistake in a math equation, and it's, oh, you suck at math. And then you see a girl making a mistake in a math equation, oh, girls suck at math. It's the same thing. Because, you know, a movie with a female action hero failed, it's because the world isn't ready for a female action hero. A movie with a male action hero failed, it's because, I don't know, whatever. The production...
Clearly Catwoman failed because it was a woman-led movie.
Only Catwoman were played by a man.
I can actually comment on Catwoman here. Because I mentioned that Bitten is a TV show now. Back when it first came out, this would have been 2001, Warner Brothers had it, and Angelina Jolie was signed to star in it. And they were talking big budgets, big name directors, and in a few years after that, Warner Brothers had both Catwoman and Elektra tanked for them, and yes, they actually did say this proved that you could not have a female-led action movie, and that's when they didn't renew on Bitten. They dropped it.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yes,
Smart.
those movies, their failure had nothing to do with their intrinsic quality.
Brilliant analytical thing.
Yeah, if I may just add one more thing. When I read a book that I'm considering for publication, and I know that it's the same with other publishers in Israel, even the big ones, I don't think the editors or those who are in charge of choosing those books care if the character is one kind of person or another. They simply look for a good book. I think, well, at least this is the case with me, but
well, you know what?
The case with others.
They say that.
No, because I know them personally, so
yes,
we talk about it.
They think that.
Prejudice is unconscious.
Yeah.
Also, most of the other editors are women.
And yet, if you look at the number of books being published, there are more in Hebrew, including in Hebrew and science fiction translation. There are more books by men and more books with male protagonists. By a large majority, and this has improved in recent years. but there's still a discrepancy.
Again, let's not go there because it's a whole other field, but most prejudice is subconscious, and women are just as liable to be sexist as men because we're born in the same sexist society. And again, people aren't aware that they discriminate. They still discriminate.
Well, that's the thing with equality. Everybody gets to be wrong.
Yeah, but the sentence "we only care about it being good" is a sentence people say while not noticing their own biases.
Again, what we consider good may be a character that you can empathize with. And for example, women and people of color are trained since birth to empathize with men and white people, while white men are trained to empathize with no one except other white men. So if you read a book with a protagonist who is a person of color or a woman, you might feel uncomfortable with it without realizing. I'm not saying that you will, I'm saying that's the level on which that prejudice works. That's the problem.
I'd really like to hear from Wouter about this and your experience with editors and biases.
Especially
Well, okay. Some editors have agendas, some don't. Most editors are women, and so far as I can see, happily accept books by women, and some actively encourage writers of color to submit to them. Some are politically more conservative, some say that they're essentially blind to all those issues and just buy the stuff that they like. And so, what you find in publishing and the editorial staff is a good deal of diversity. Some editors are activists, some aren't. Some who would like to be activists if they had more power. Okay, and so, you know, their prejudices are clear, but they're not in a position in which they can actually speak on a platform about it. But I've been seeing this for a very long time. Samuel R. Delany probably wasn't the first black science fiction writer, but he was the first black science fiction writer that people knew about and that got to be very well known. And his book, Nova, won the Nebula Award for Best Novel in 1968, I believe. And it was quite an experience because the guest speaker at that award banquet denounced his book before the awards. So this is terrible, this kind of writing is destroying science fiction. You hear that destroying science fiction thing a lot. It's become a fun meme in the last couple of years. And he spoke against it at some length, and Delany was in the audience and he had to sit through this, and then he won the award for Best Novel. So I think that's archetypical experience for people who attempt diversity in this field, which is that you get denounced. You get people who make speeches on your behalf, and then you get the awards. And incidentally, the writer, and you can read about this experience from Delany's point of view because he wrote a long essay about it and it's available online. But he, the author who he did not name, who denounced his book, later admitted to him that he hadn't read it. He just heard about it from someone else who didn't like it. And when he did read it, he liked it. So, you know, I don't think any of this is new. I think if you go back to the letter columns of science fiction magazines of the 20s, you know, you will find this kind of argument going on at enormous length. You know, there were people who were banned from the First World Con for political reasons. Okay, and New York fandom broke in half, and is still, I mean, everyone who was involved in that controversy is dead now. But the legacy is still there.
Yeah, a schism has always been a thing that happens in science fiction fandom.
Yeah.
Speaking of letter columns in the 20s and 30s, this is an example that I often bring up in my own lectures. There are a couple of brilliant examples of Isaac Asimov writing letters to, I don't remember what it was astounding, amazing, whatever, you know, Campbell was the editor, and in which he goes on and on at length because, you know, it was a small community and people sort of interacted in the letter columns as they do online today. about how women have no place in science fiction as characters, because there is no place for romance in science fiction, and of course the only role a woman can play in a story is that of a love interest. And Isaac Asimov was very adamant, there is no romance, it ruins the story, because it brings in all these icky emotions, and of course there's no place for that in science fiction.
Now, one thing is that it is believed that, you know, classic science fiction of the 40s and 30s and so on was written exclusively by men, and it wasn't. It wasn't. There were a lot of women writers in that period, but they've sort of faded from the histories. As have most of the male writers.
A lot of them were writing under pseudonyms because they couldn't get.
Not a lot of them. No, there were some that were very plainly women, and they were popular writers of the time. You know, but they're just not remembered.
A lot of them aren't.
As you know, there are only like 5 writers from the 40s that we do remember, so they all have.
There's an idea for an anthology.
Yeah.
There are. I actually collect old. I love collecting old anthologies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and onwards because it gives you a very good idea. Because most of it is, of course, pardon me, crap. Because it's stories that were published and forgotten, and you say nobody remembers.
Sturgeon's law always applies.
Sturgeon's law, completely and utterly. But you get a very good feel for the sort of the themes that were prevalent, the sort of ambiance that was prevalent in the genre at the time, and you get this very and there were women writers, but again, a lot of them. As I said before, women can be just as sexist, just as prejudiced, just as racist as men. We grow up in the same culture. And very much in the 30s and 40s and 50s, you very much get the sense of, this is a man's world, a white man's world, American white man's world, and the rest of us are allowed maybe to be supporting characters or raise some chickens. There's the Isaac Asimov story, Even's Round, where one person lives on an entire Earth, and he has his little wifey at home, and he buys her chickens. So while he's off doing his business, and she stays at home alone on this whole earth that belongs to them, she can take care of the chickens.
I love that story. That is because they have the whole planet to themselves.
Yeah. And the chickens.
Okay, I think at this point we are going to take some audience questions. I would like to point out that, just a second, that Tuesday we have the Q&A with Wouter and Kelly, in which we will be talking about their fiction. So now is a good time for questions about diversity and variety, not about their work, unless it relates to the topic.
You spoke about diversity about the hero. What about diversity in the universe? Is there anything that is diverse in the way we write another world?
Wouter?
Well, I think some writers make a point of that. Ursula Le Guin, that she has the background in anthropology. And a good example of that would be The Word for World is Forest, which I think is a story that was very much of its time. It's not as relevant now as it was then. But it deals very much with the peculiar culture of the native species on this world and how it relates to a human threat or invasion. I think it's by the time all of the sort of spiky bits were filed off, it became the film Avatar, sort of. But all the stuff that made it really interesting and controversial and unique. Well, it's the same story. What can I tell you? Yeah. So.
I just have to just a little anecdote. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. Ursula Le Guin, Left Hand of Darkness. Everybody knows that one? Now, it's a story about a society, a culture in which people are neither male nor female until Kemer, until they go through, they have a period once a month where they can go either male or female. And the thing is that she wrote the androgynous characters using male pronouns. And actually, like 20 years later, she wrote another essay, which I remembered it because you said it was the Word for World is Forest was a story of its time. It's the same thing because 20 years later she wrote, I was trying to do something different. I was trying to sort of break the gender binary, but I was so caught up in it myself that I couldn't escape it, and I gave my gender-neutral characters male pronouns, and today I would do it different.
Yeah. Which of course, once again, brings us to the Imperial Raj books by Anne Leckie, Ancillary Justice and the recently published Ancillary Sword.
dealt with that brilliantly. By the way, you know, I wasn't crazy about that.
Yeah, did you read Sword?
And I read that Sort of Justice,
Yeah.
wasn't crazy about it, loved the way it handled it.
Yeah, Sword, which just came out, and if you read Justice, you should know you should read it, and if you haven't, you should read Ancillary Justice. That's some really interesting stuff with the gender.
You already read Sword?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. But yeah, I finished it on Saturday. So that would be yesterday, yeah. So yeah, ages ago. So there's, in those books, for those who haven't read it, the default pronoun is female to all genders. That there's somebody, a character saying something that will give you an idea of that culture's view of that topic, as in somebody saying, those people are barbarians. They differentiate between people with a penis and people without a penis. And there's a character who's a sexual predator. And throughout the book, and of course all these characters, both the sexual predator and the potential prey, are referred to as female. And later on you find out that the prey is male. You still don't know what the predator's gender was. What? No, that's not a spoiler. Trust me. There are spoilers I could say. That's not one. So it's really interesting. She does really interesting stuff with that. So yeah, I think it's important for me as a reader to read a diverse world. To read a world that's not... I've had this argument on Facebook. I think everyone who's interested in diversity has had that. People say, but why is that color not white? Which begs the question, why is that other color white? Why does there have to be a default? Which bugs the hell out of me. But your question, yeah.
So speaking of marginalization and erasure and things that are stigmatized in fandom, also shout out to the Tumblr social justice and fandom groups. One of the big issues that is now really coming to light is the subject of mental illness and disability in fandom. What do you think, as creators and us as consumers, can do to help break down the stigmas and bring better representation of disabled and mentally divergent characters in fandom?
Yeah, but you meant in fandom? Or
I meant
reflecting it within
the fandom
books?
world, and it's reflecting it, better representation, better discussion of these characters, making it non-appropriative, not condescending, making it realistic, and making it characters that people learn to empathize and identify with.
And I think that there definitely is room for that, and I would like to see more of that. One of my YAs, it's paranormal. So the kids are diagnosed with various mental illnesses and put into a group home. And I really tried, because my background, my degree is psychology, it's abnormal psych. So I really tried to portray that in a way, being aware that my audience is teens who could be diagnosed with the same things. How am I portraying that? And it actually has really stuck with me, wanting to do more of that. And I actually just finished a novel that I've sold that is a YA thriller, not fantasy, but the male main character has been a year earlier diagnosed schizophrenic. Because that is obviously at that age, I mean, early, late teens, early 20s. And it is something that obviously is very stigmatized in our society. And having many people in my family and friends with various mental illnesses, including schizophrenia, it really was important to me to try to represent somebody dealing with that. How well that will actually do, we will find out. But I'd like to see more of it, definitely, because it is an issue, particularly with teen fiction. It is an issue they are dealing with, and it is important, again, to see themselves represented, whether it is depression, anxiety, anything else, to at least occasionally see themselves represented there.
Yeah, I have a number of protagonists who are not exactly models of mental health, but I don't actually think that's what you want to talk about. I did confront these issues directly in a book called Aristoi, in which the ruling class deliberately fracture their own consciousness in an attempt to produce multiple personalities, which are then kind of empowered cybernetically so that they can become, so that they can each develop a more full personality and take over kind of part of the workload. And I did receive communications from people who had multiple personality disorder telling me that I got it right, which is pretty nice. Now the difference between the people that I was writing about and the people who actually have that disorder, if you have multiple personality disorder, which is the old name, there's a new name for it now, but multiple personality, if you have that, there's nobody who's actually in charge, right? So in Aristoi, my characters did have a governing personality that was able to decide which personality was going to be dominant, which was going to handle which tasks, and so on. And so that's what I was attempting to do with that. And I was very gratified, to hear from the people who suffered from that, that I made some right guesses, because it's a very nebulous condition, and I did read in the literature, but as soon as you start reading in that literature, you find other literature that says that the literature that you just read is completely bogus. So it's difficult to nail down this stuff.
Yeah, I'll also mention Rick Riordan's books, which Wetronic publishes, where Percy Jackson is a learning disabled kid who who very early on, it's not a spoiler, learns that what he and society perceived as being disabled actually means he's a demigod. And he's got superpowers.
Yes, and I'll just add that Rick based that character. He said it in many public places, so I'm feeling totally comfortable saying that. He based it on his own son.
Yeah.
Actually, his own son was the basis for the whole series. So.
And Ronnie will be the first to tell you, those books do really well. Yeah.
Michael.
Wouter, you speaking about Aristotle. It should be mentioned that the protagonist, and this is a space opera far future, and he's also gay as a male part.
Yeah.
And I want to hear what was the reaction of readers, publishers, and everyone else to these type of
I never heard anyone had a problem with that. And the character wasn't gay; he was bisexual. Right, because he had a fragmented personality. Some of them like boys, some of them like girls. All right. So, actually, I heard very little about that aspect, which surprised me. I keep trying to court controversy, and controversy keeps escaping me. So there you go.
So those damn covers.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask regarding how to fix the diversity issue. If, like Gabby said, the discrimination is inherently good, this is society we live in, because everybody's sexist, should we have some sort of affirmative action, both in the writers we encourage, like we give grants for writers from different groups, not equal white males and stuff like that, or in the stories and backgrounds of those stories we as the industry encourages. Is there a place for like affirmative action?
Probably not in commercial publishing. But as I say, there are editors who deliberately seek out writers who do diversity. But commercial publishing is a Darwinian industry, and the writers who are better have a better chance, right? Who handle these issues better. But still, it's a crapshoot. It's just what the dice come up with, and then that's what the next generation takes away. Unfortunately, that if Catwoman fails, yeah. Right, that means there won't be Catwoman for another generation, or there won't be Wonder Woman, right?
Yeah, but again, that's a question.
But that's,
if Catwoman failed, the fact that there won't be another Catwoman is fine, but the fact that there isn't another female-led, that's the problem.
However, there are for people of color, etc. There are writers' retreats, foundations, so on, There's a woman of color who was my student at Clarion Workshop a couple years ago, has just become the Octavia Butler Scholar. And so there's that kind of thing going on, where it's kind of indirect support, not of the career, but of the writer themselves. And that's happening, and that's pretty terrific.
As an editor, I can say that since I'm in recent years very interested in diversity, I'm reading more diverse work, and that's certainly going to have an impact on when Nova, which is my upcoming science fiction line, comes out. That is definitely going to be reflected by that.
And by the way, I hope you're paying Delaney for that title.
It's a word, man. It's a word. It means new in Latin.
Okay. No, I once had somebody take the word hardwired, right, for a publishing line, and then they forbade me to use it.
See, that's
yeah.
not.
No, that would, yeah. So.
Okay, you've been had your hand for a while.
It feels that science fiction and fantasy is a bit atheistic. Yeah.
Speak louder for once.
Atheistic means religion is not so talked about, and I would like to know if you think that there is any chance I would see science fiction and fantasy talking about Islam, Christianity. I see a bit, but Islam, Hindu, Judaism, obviously, it's interesting. What do you think it can work?
For one thing, there's a lot of stuff about non-Earth religions, like a ton, and I mentioned the Imperial Raj series. You should definitely read that. And and Hyperion is a super Christian book. But you're also seeing in recent years a huge upswell of Muslim writers, and some of them do deal with those issues.
And this is a discussion that Ehud and I often have, that we feel that science fiction is sort of, or at least part of it, is drifting towards New Age-ish spiritualism with the whole singularity issue, which is as close as science fiction can come to being spiritual and talking about transcendence while staying within the confines of science fiction. Because that's a problem. The moment you put God/gods / miracles in there, is it still science fiction, or does it cross the line?
Well, science fiction is a fantasy. However, I mean, religion is very common in fantasy, and even when it's not on the surface. I mean, Lord of the Rings is a very Catholic book. Yeah. Lord of the Rings is so Catholic that he doesn't have to tell you that it's Catholic.
For example, Connie Willis is a religious writer, and she doesn't have an agenda. She doesn't preach in her stories. But I, as a non-Christian reader book, I can feel her Christianity between the lines, because it influences and informs everything she writes.
And I will mention one recent series of books, which is Max Gladstone's books, which have created the subgenre that he's willing to let be called faith punk. And, it was not his idea, but at this point he's gone to accept it. He's gotten to accept it. So you should read that. That's got a lot of gods.
I have to say that I prefer.
Yeah, that's his whole point. Yeah, gods and magic is technology.
Also as economy. Also as economy, really.
I have to say that I personally prefer, maybe because I'm totally atheistic, I prefer science fiction books that if those books are dealing with any kind of religion, they do it from a critical point of view. I guess Lord of Light might be a good example.
But there are writers lately that deal with the, what should I call it, the religious sentiment, or the religious, yeah, and it's sort of neurochemical basis.
Yeah, Daryl's story. What's
Damascus. Gregory. And if you've read Lexicon by what's his name, Barry, these two it deals with the problem of the issue of faith.
It deals with the cognitive aspect. Again, it's a very sort of scientific, rational, atheistic approach to science fiction rather than a spiritual approach. And I think it's because there's a basic sort of cognitive dissonance between transcendence and science fiction. Unless, again, you go to the singularity corner, which, in my opinion, as I say,
Guest of honor, holding a mic, Gunny.
And let's And no one's mentioned Gene Wolfe.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Why don't you?
Okay, well, you know, yeah, all right. Gene Wolfe is a very Catholic writer, another very Catholic writer. He doesn't write explicitly about religion, although in the Long Sun books, he gets as close as he does. But actually, it's the Long Sun is in the Long Sun. It's more about Manichaeanism, I think. So we've got. Yeah, so it's definitely an unorthodox take on all of that, and of course Cordwainer Smith was, you know, has just immense amount of religion kind of hiding behind the science fiction scaffolding.
Sure, but some authors can be very religious. Tim Powers is a very Catholic man,
Yeah.
and his work is almost, he really tries not to put it in his work. There's one short story about abortion where he fails horribly in not preaching.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
And at the other extreme end of the spectrum, you have things which we simply don't see in Israel and we don't get translated, which is Christian fiction, which you have in the States. You have Christian science fiction and you have Christian fantasy, which is explicitly Christian, American Christian, by the way. American
You mean things like the Left Behind and so on?
Yeah, oh my God, I read the entire Left Behind series.
Why?
Because I'm fascinated by American Christianity. Fascinated by it.
So it was from a research point of view.
Absolutely, anthropological. But what I said is that there is a subgenre that deals with sort of Christianity specifically, as to why we don't see Judaism.
Gali, I have more questions.
You've had your hand up for a while, just a second. You've had your hand up for a while.
I was a very vociferous reader as a kid, and it's actually, I don't think it ever occurred.
Speak a little slower and a little louder.
Sorry. I was a very vociferous reader as a kid, and I don't think it occurred to me to bias myself against female protagonists, non-white protagonists, etc. I was too young when I started reading. But one thing I did notice getting a little bit older is most things tend to go to an extreme. Like, you take a series that's got, you know, non-straight characters, there tends to either be one of them or 20,000 of them. I never found a book that really balanced what I saw in society to
and the books where all the characters were straight, did they balance what you see in society?
No.
And that I bet you passed right over your head.
No, not at all.
No, you noticed it when you were a child that there were
about 13.
I'm having a discussion, Didy.
No, you're interrogating the audience member.
About 13, yes, I did start to notice that. About the same time I started reading much of the same as Blackie, and noticed that swinging totally the other way.
Yeah.
And now getting into Tumblr, because Dan is massively into Tumblr, again, the extended universe stuff on Tumblr tends to suddenly make everybody gay or bisexual or bisexual.
And the problem with that is?
Everybody's queer and nothing hurts.
I'm looking, does there exist something that isn't trying to make a point?
I don't know. Again, okay, I'll shut up. Somebody else.
All right, I think science fiction exists in order to make a point, you know, if you're a certain kind of writer. So, yeah, that's fine. Let's have our pointed fictions. You know, but you also have the perfect right to deal with other stuff, and to not have your point be diversity. If that's not what you want to write about. I think you should reflect what the future is likely to look like if you're writing about the future. If you're writing about the present, you should certainly reflect what the present looks like. But on the other hand, that may not be your ideological axe to grind. And I think in the past we've seen a lot of that. You know, I have relatively few ideological axes that I want to grind, but I do try to reflect what I see around me. So in my case, the diversity of my protagonists and so on is a reflection of what I see rather than an attempt to impose a view on my own work, if that makes any sense. I hope it does.
No, yes, I totally agree that it is. It is that rather than setting out and just saying, you know, and I sometimes call it like checking off boxes. And there is that idea of going through your work and going, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? I'm at least striving to the point where all of that is natural. I don't check off boxes. My characters tend to come to me as I see them. And whether that is sexuality, ethnicity, they come to me as I see them. And thankfully there is some diversity there. I would like to see more. And I think, yes, I think we all have our biases, and it's impossible to get rid of that. As a 45-year-old Canadian woman who grew up in a mid-sized Canadian city, I certainly did not grow up in a diverse area. And so it is a matter of overcoming my default, because my default is a white middle-aged woman, and not white straight middle-aged woman, etc., etc. And trying to overcome that, but it is trying to avoid the tick box approach and just have that naturalistic, more diversity there.
I will say middle-aged people, underrepresented in fiction.
Well, I think the people were voting earlier. Had your hand up earlier. What's next?
Okay, so I have a preface, and I'm going to use the female demographic as an example. So in different mediums, like for example in movies, women are mostly banned from the really high budget, explosive kind of genre. They don't star in it because that's the director from the studio. You can't have a multi-million budget film starring a woman.
Except Lucy.
It was, I don't know what it was.
Hunger Games, that did kind of well.
Yes.
Divergent, that was apparently terrible, but it did okay.
What I'm trying to say is that many studios have a directive, and it was script writers talked about it online for quite a while, that you don't do a movie with a female protagonist if your budget is over X million dollars. Like for example, there's a very famous story about the screenwriter who adopted a very famous book to a movie for a script, and he went through several studios, and they were like, oh, that's fine, it looks wonderful, just make the main protagonist a man and we'll take it. The movie was Hunger Games.
And they didn't, and that worked out. And the reason, by the way, to your point, the reason Salt was greenlit was back when Tom Cruise was supposed to star in it. And then he bailed out, and they got Angelina Jolie, and didn't change anything, and that worked great.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say, like, okay, so in video games you have the same thing. Many publishers don't do AAA video games with female stars. That's also a directive from the publisher because they apparently don't sell. It's bullshit. I know it, and there are positive examples to that thing. So I'm getting to my point. I really am.
Yeah, we're waiting for a question. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems that books are by far the most diverse genre we have at the moment. So what I'm trying to say is, are there any limitations? Maybe certain kind of characters relegated to certain subgenres, and other subgenres are close to them because of publisher directives? Or are there any limitations if you're writing a character X, it cannot be whatever?
No.
No.
I have been published by, well, okay, it was 4 of the big 6 US. It's now 3 of the big 5 because 2 of them joined up. But I have never, and I've been, I mean, lots of editors, whether it is US, I have a separate Canadian publisher, a separate UK publisher, so I have 3 English language. I don't ever get that. I just don't. I mean, there's never a sense of, except for the one time when they were just concerned about cultural appropriation, and that was a very specific case because dealing with Native American, it is different. But otherwise, never ever. I mean, nobody ever says, make sure that we would prefer this book if a character was something different.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Now, in Hollywood, women need to buy their own movie tickets. See, that's movies are things that that you take a date to, right? So, and generally the boy buys the ticket, so the boy chooses the movie. Okay. No? All right, that's good.
That's not been true for a while.
It's the other way around in television. You see a lot more female protagonists in TV.
As of late, mostly. But
Yeah.
before that, they were also relegated to certain subgenres.
Yes, true.
As were people of
Well, television is relegated to subgenres, but yes.
By the way, if I may, there was the famous directive by John Campbell at the time, and he said that all of the science fiction stories that he published had to have an American protagonist, and the humans had to beat aliens in their interaction. And that's, by the way, the reason that Isaac Asimov almost never wrote Aliens, because he was so pissed off at this directive. He said, if the humans must always beat the aliens, I just won't write any aliens. And he hardly ever did.
Yeah. No.
But then you had a story that he published, like Martian Odyssey.
No, he wrote The Gods Themselves because somebody told him he can't write sex, so he said, I'll write a book that's all.
No, I meant John Campbell.
Oh,
he published Martian Odyssey by, what's his name, Stanley or something?
Yes,
and over there they were friends. They were all friends. Nobody beat.
No, because there was no conflict. If you remember, the early stories were always about people, colonialism in space.
Yeah. Well, they did steal the aliens' magic. Jim in that.
They had it coming.
Yeah, right.
The aliens.
I don't know if it's still relevant, but I want to go back. Kelly, you have a character, I'm talking about religion. You have a character, I won't say names and stuff like that, but she's an angel, and she's not very angelic in her character. So I want to ask you about the religion. First of all, was there any kind of backlash that you're writing an angelic character that is not anything bad?
Yeah, it was a very weird experience for me, because that would be my fifth book, Haunted, which is, I basically created my own afterlife. And I was just waiting for the backlash on that. And yes, my ascended angel is also half demon, so and a dark witch, which means that she can do the kick-ass job, but isn't exactly angelic. And so I was waiting for the backlash, and I never got it. Never. I was especially waiting for the Christian backlash. Just for something. Really, I was rather disappointed that I never got backlash. Even people who were very religious, because they were fantasy readers, they recognized that what I was doing was fantasy, and they enjoyed it for what it was. And if there was any backlash, I never heard it. The one time that I heard backlash, and I heard lots of backlash, was bizarrely, and I think it was my fourth book, my rather young liberal female protagonist made a smart-ass comment about George Bush. Oh, I heard backlash. That was the only time. That is the most controversial thing I've ever done.
Yes. Oh, and I should, in regard to your point, I just remembered a case of Steve Sterling, S.M. Sterling, wrote a series that had a black lesbian protagonist.
Awesome.
Black lesbian naval officer protagonist. Okay, and his editor, Jim Bain, said, no, you can't do that. And Jim Bain was notably political and very conservative, and he said you can have a black lesbian villain, but you can't have a black lesbian protagonist. And so Steve got mad and he took it to another publisher, and it was an enormous success. It was his first best-selling series ever, and he's followed it with a number of others. I don't, but because of S.M. Sterling's other political opinions. He's widely perceived as being a reactionary, imperialist, etc. He got very little credit for that character, I thought.
Yes, I'd like to say in response to what you said, as any listener of Night Vale would know, angels do not exist. Yeah, that was a limited audience joke, but yeah.
The ones who got it got them.
Question to both of you writers. As it seems that fantasy and science fiction gains more mainstream credibility and exposure, do you feel that you are more empowered now and maybe also more responsible now to tackle social issues like diversity?
Well, I always had that power. I mean, you know, I really did. I could write anything I wanted, and frequently have. You know, it's whether the audience is there to receive it or even notices. I mean, sometimes, you know, as I say, I sometimes have deliberately court controversy, and I don't get controversy. So,
Make a comment,
you know, everybody's
on the president.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There we go. All right. I've lost track. So carry on, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing. I've always had that freedom. That's been one good thing about what, I don't know if it's what I write or who I've written for, or I've just gotten lucky, or if that's just the way it is. That I've always written bizarre mashups that are multiple genres put together. Some diversity of character and so on, and no one's ever said anything. So it hasn't had anything to do with them becoming more popular. And conversely, I suppose you could wonder whether, as something becomes more mainstream, do you get more restrictions? And I haven't had any of that. It's just been a very great thing to write because nobody ever tells me you can't do that, which is kind of awesome.
Green shirt.
First of all, I wanted to make a quick note.
Slightly louder because you're in the back.
I want to make a quick note about the religious part of writing. My favorite author isn't the greatest guy ever. It's which writes sometimes about the biggest controversies there are, and he just doesn't care because he's not the greatest guy ever. He just doesn't care about the backlash of the things, which makes stories much better for me, at least. I really appreciate the writer, and the second thing is I come from a video game point of view.
If you have a question, please get to it because
Yeah,
we're running out of time.
So, in video games, there aren't really a lot of female, male main protagonists, which it's probably because of the violence in it. But recently, we see more of these. Like we see more main protagonists, not in video games. Like we can see the true love in movies like Frozen or Maleficent, which does not involve men at all. And in video games, what I wanted to say is that after you finish a game, you reflect about all the process and what it meant, and sometimes the gender or the race of any character changes the way you look back at it. Like, I can't imagine the Little Prince if the pilot was a woman. I would.
Yeah, but that's mostly because in the one you read, the pilot was a man. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. That was a speech, not a question. One last question. No, you got to ask one. You, back.
Thanks. I have a tiny question.
Tiny's good.
Yeah. You talk a lot about labels, have a colored protagonist, have a gay protagonist, but most of the books aren't about the labels. And my question is, how do you deal with writing about characters which you yourselves are not part of their group? How do you prepare yourselves? How do you know how they think, how they act?
Yeah, Kelly answered that already.
Yeah, and it is lots of research. And research means, whether it's anything from, books, online. People are a really good source of that. And there are, to be perfectly honest, some cheats. Like I said, when I did mine, my character was integrated in a very small North American community where within her community, she did not face that prejudice because it's so tiny. Of course, she did when she went outside of it, like somebody in her area would. And I did reflect that. But there are those little cheats, because I would never have written from the point of view of a Native American teen living on a reservation. That is so far outside. I would have clearly felt that would have been wrong.
Yeah, I'll just only echo that. I mean, the thing about writing about anybody is assuming that your character is a human being, that human beings all have a lot in common. I think every human being in this room, regardless of your background, knows what it's like to be an outsider. Okay, you know what it's like to feel challenges. You know what it's like to feel inadequate. You know, and well, okay, except you. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of it. You know, we all know what it's like to fall in love. We all know what it's like to fall out of love. We all know what it's like to be in love with somebody who doesn't love you back. Right. That's 95% of being a human. Right there, and the part that expresses diversity or a different culture is something that you have to be aware of and be very careful about. But it really doesn't go into the totality of your character. If you write a character who is a black person, and he's the black guy, right, and he represents every black guy that's ever existed throughout all time.
Like South Park's character Token.
Yeah, you could have you know, you can have all the best intentions of the world, but the character isn't going to come off as convincing.
Okay, and now is our time to wrap up. I'd just like to say that tomorrow, both of our lovely guests of honor are going to be on our panel dealing with the secrets of science fiction and fantasy writers, which means we'll probably cross over to some of the topics we talked about today, because we crossed over to those topics here. I hope you come, it'll be great. Gali won't be there, so that's sad. But they will be there, so that's great. Gali won't be there either. Which is also sad. I'd like to thank our guests.